My name is Analisa Sovern-Reed, and I'm presenting today on why we chose to incorporate open educational resources into our global art history classes here at Lindenwood University. Now, traditionally, art history kind of has a bad rap as being stuck in the ivory tower. You're just focusing on textbooks and scholarly articles that aren't necessarily accessible to the student body. But we sought to change that. We incorporated text, audio, and visual resources into our global art history curriculum in order to reach a variety of learners. Now, this may strike some people as odd because art history really isn't known for its utilization of technology, but again, we sought to change that. There's a lot of benefits to using it. Firstly, accessibility. Students who are different kinds of learners don't have to just be stuck reading or listening to lectures. Instead, they can watch videos, engage with materials on fun museum activities, and more. Additionally, it's affordable. According to Muffet Jones of Boise State University, textbook costs rise about 6% each year and then double every 11. For some, that's just unattainable, especially when they rely on things like financial aid. Open educational resources are often free or very low cost, which means that students have access to the same types of quality material without that heavy price tag. This not only helps boost their confidence in their ability to complete school because they aren't worried about financial strain, but allows them to engage with the same materials as their peers, leveling the playing field. Additionally, students who prefer to watch videos are allowed to choose that. It's kind of a choose your own adventure game in our course, where students are gamifying the experience as opposed to just be told what pages each week to read in their textbooks. Now, this does come with some challenges. Content curation can be a bit harder. Instead of just turning to a textbook and saying, read pages 15 through 19 for tonight's homework, we had to go through and scour the internet to make sure that we not only had accessible materials, but that they reached the standards of art historical scholarship. It took a lot of research, but I'm really glad that we did it because there's so much out there that it creates a diverse perspective on art history that we're able to incorporate into our class. Again, we also had to ensure the relevance. Was the material more current so that the most recent scholarship was available? At the end of the day, it was 100% worth it to incorporate these resources into our curriculum because we're able to help students learn about the wonders of art history. Now, some of the ways that we did that was through thematic lessons. Instead of just talking about the Benin bronzes in Africa or the Spanish conquest of the Americas and the art that came out of it, we framed it from a global perspective. How did these things impact global history? What are the perspectives of both the conquerors and the conquered? It was an intense experience to read about some of these things for students who maybe didn't learn the full extent of these issues in their classes. Now, I love showing this clip from Black Panther if you're not familiar with it. Basically, the bad guy goes to a museum and accuses the curator of basically stealing his cultural heritage. This not only impacted students because, hey, it's a Marvel film and those are familiar to me, but it helped make them think about the global perspective of colonization and how it impacted art and history. Same goes with the Spanish conquest of America. Throughout the country, sometimes Columbus Day is still celebrated, though here in my state, it's now Native American Heritage Day. But why is it this way? Why are we thinking about it? How can we use art to show these things? Again, using open educational resources opens the doors to these conversations for a more global perspective. It's interesting to see student opinions and how they are formed through not only viewing the art, but viewing the different kinds of resources that are available. I think it's important to talk about the impact of learning when you're using an open educational resource. Not only are they more accessible because they're often framed in language that is more familiar to students versus the quote ivory tower language of scholarly journals, but it helps them create a global perspective. In our curriculum, we did not just put Western art and non Western art and separate them into two or three different classes. Instead, we framed it based on a timeline. So, for example, the class that I created was about the early medieval period all the way through the Baroque. But sprinkled throughout there, I touched on cultures that were contemporary to the Baroque period in parts of Asia and Africa. We thought it was important to show that the world wasn't just separated in Western and non Western art. Instead, everyone was connected, especially as time went on. We ensured that students would understand that perhaps this dynasty in China was contemporary to the same dynasty in France and how they may have interacted with each other. This not only shows students that art and history weren't necessarily independent by culture, but all of history wasn't, and will help frame their opinions and help them to understand the world around them in the modern era. Additionally, it helped improve their critical thinking skills. Instead of being told what to think from one textbook or one article, they were encouraged to explore multiple videos, multiple articles, or multiple podcasts to hear different people's opinions on the same subject. This helped them to develop their critical thinking skills because they were taught that it's okay to have their own perspective on something and that it was valid and they should bring that to the table for discussions. We want to ensure that our students are able to understand the world around them is just not set in one way, but instead frame it and use different ways of explaining themselves using art and historical context. That leads to an increased student engagement because students are confident in their ability to understand the material because they picked out what they wanted to learn and how they wanted to learn in a particular set, whether it be video, podcast, or article. They were more confident coming to class and helping to understand the material. They were able to speak on it. This is a great improvement upon older classes where sometimes the scholarly articles were just too dense for the average student. Now that they're confident in their ability to speak on a subject, whether it be the Mona Lisa or a Ming Dynasty vase, they could bring something to the table that would allow them to participate in class and gain valuable understanding. Thank you so much for listening to this presentation.